Hello and welcome to CloudExpert Solutions, your favorite cloud learning channel. And welcome back to AWS Certification Bootcamp. In this module, we will focus on AWS CloudTrail. If you are reviewing this module for AWS AI Practitioner certification, then you can skip the lab part at the end of this video. However, if you are reviewing this module for AWS Certified Solution Architect or Machine Learning Associate Certification Bootcamp, we highly recommend you reviewing the video end to end. One of our learners recently faced a deep dive question on AWS CloudTrail during AI Practitioner certification, which may be part of AWS's regular practice of introducing unscored or pre-test questions. However, we want to cover all the concepts you need to pass these certifications confidently. CloudTrail is essentially the black box recorder for your entire AWS account, and it answers the critical questions like who did this and when did it happen. Understanding this service is non-negotiable for security, compliance, and even data governance in AI/ML workloads. Let's dive in and see how it works. Let's review the roadmap for today's session. As usual, we will start by reviewing what problem AWS CloudTrail resolve. Then we will review a high-level overview of AWS CloudTrail, followed by how AWS CloudTrail works, then CloudTrail event types, followed by AWS CloudTrail data retention and pricing. We will also familiarize ourselves with the use cases of AWS CloudTrail. Then we will navigate to AWS Management Console and review AWS CloudTrail. And as always, we will finish up with a quick summary and key takeaways for your certification preparation. On behalf of the CloudExpert Solutions team, I would like to thank you for joining us and selecting this bootcamp. And I promise this session is going to add a lot of value to your AWS certification preparation. The biggest issue with any cloud environment is the visibility gap. If someone on your team accidentally deletes an S3 bucket or changes an IAM policy, how do you know who did it or when that change happened? Or how do you figure out why your system mysteriously stopped working last night, maybe at 2 a.m.? Manual checking does not scale. On the other hand, regulatory compliance requires traceability or audit trail of your critical systems. An inability to prove who accessed the data is a direct violation of compliance requirement. AWS CloudTrail resolves this by providing a continuous, transparent, and auditable record of all API calls and actions taken in your account. And these are essentials for security, troubleshooting, and regulatory compliance. Think of CloudTrail as the black box recorder of your AWS account actions. It captures actions made through the AWS Management Console or via AWS CLI, AWS SDK, and also any actions performed by other AWS services. The primary feature is centralized logging. It takes all these events record and securely deliver them to an S3 bucket that you control. This allows for long-term storage. It also integrates seamlessly with Amazon CloudWatch Log, which enable you to set up real-time alerts based on specific activities like getting an email whenever a critical security group is modified or whenever someone is trying to elevate their IAM permissions. You will be able to capture all such critical events. All the logs are encrypted at rest and in transit. And in terms of default behavior, AWS CloudTrail is enabled by default for all new and existing AWS accounts, and it automatically logs management events. We have a dedicated slide to explain different types of events that CloudTrail supports. CloudTrail also stores past 90 days of event history for free, and you can access them via AWS Management Console. But if you need to store the logs for more than 90 days, then you can create a new trail and deliver logs to an S3 bucket for long-term retention. When you create a trail using the AWS Management Console, it is configured as multi-region trail by default, and this is to ensure that the trail capture and logs activity from all the current and future AWS regions. You can also create a single region trail in AWS to log events for a specific AWS region. You can also optionally configure CloudTrail integrity validation. This is to ensure the authenticity and integrity of your CloudTrail log files by detecting if they have been tampered with any type of addition, deletion, or modification after you deliver them to your S3 bucket. Now let's trace the flow and understand how AWS CloudTrail works. First, you can optionally create a new trail or use the existing default trail. If you have a requirement to retain the event history beyond 90 days, then you need to create a new trail with an S3 bucket as destination for the logs. You can also enable integrity validation while delivering the logs to Amazon S3, and we have discussed this in the previous slide. Now let's assume a user action, maybe a human user or any AWS service role, perform an action. Maybe they are trying to stop an EC2 instance or create an S3 bucket policy. Then CloudTrail will automatically capture this call. It then takes this information and write it into a JSON log file, and these log files are delivered to your S3 bucket in near real time, usually within about 5 minutes. So please remember, this will be near real time, not real time. For data security, CloudTrail encrypts this log file with a KMS key before the logs are written to S3 bucket, and you have the option to choose either AWS managed key or customer managed key while you are configuring the trail. If you would like to trigger an alert based on the CloudTrail log, you can also do so, and you can send these logs to Amazon CloudWatch. Now let's review AWS CloudTrail event types. AWS CloudTrail generates three main event types for auditing and monitoring, and they are management events, data events, and insight events. Let's start with the management events, which are control plane actions. If you are asking what are they, management events are operations performed on resources in your AWS account, like creating, modifying, or deleting resources. In terms of API examples, the API operations are create bucket, delete user, or modify instance attribute. Management events are logged by default in trails and event data stores. Moving on to data events, which are data plane actions like recording resource level actions, and these are often very granular and high volume in nature. Operations like reading data from S3 bucket, storing data into S3 bucket, or invoking a Lambda function, or retrieving data from DynamoDB. An example APIs could be get object, put object for Amazon S3, invoke for AWS Lambda, or get item, put item for DynamoDB. Please remember, these events are not logged by default. You must enable them for specific resources like S3 bucket or Lambda functions. Moving on to our last event type, which is insight event, and these events to detect unusual activities in your AWS account. CloudTrail automatically analyze management events to identify unusual activities and potential threats like spikes in API error rate or unusual write volumes. The main purpose of these events are to help you quickly respond to any security issues. Insight events are also not logged by default, but you can enable them on your trail or event data stores. Now let's review the log retention policy. In CloudTrail event history, you get last 90 days of management events, that is for free, and you can access those from your AWS Management Console. But if you need logs for longer than that, which you will need for compliance or any other regulatory reason, then you configure a new CloudTrail and write those logs to S3 bucket where standard S3 retention policy will take over. And in terms of pricing, the first copy of your management event that is free. However, the data events and insight events that will incur extra cost. That is why data events and insight events are not enabled by default. So when you will enable, you have to remember that you are going to pay for these events. No matter what bootcamp path you are using to review this module, these 4 or 5 use cases you should remember for your AWS certification. Recently, AWS Certified AI Practitioner introduced a question related to AWS CloudTrail Insight Event use cases. Now let's review these 4 or 5 use cases one by one. The classic use case is security analysis and auditing. That means finding out who deleted a file or who did what on your AWS account. CloudTrail is a lifesaver for troubleshooting why a system broke after a change or why it suddenly stopped working after a certain time. CloudTrail generates immutable log for your account activity that you can persist for long term and you can use for compliance audit. For AI/ML practitioner, the data events are crucial for data governance. When you build an S3 data lake, you need an audit trail of who is accessing sensitive data. CloudTrail provides the transparency. It will help you to ensure compliance with data regulations. You can also use AWS CloudTrail for proactive monitoring and automated response, and here is one of the many available options. You can configure an Amazon Event Bridge event rule to trigger an AWS Lambda function when an insight event for a high error rate is generated and which can automatically investigate or remediate the issue. A common example of proactive remediation using a CloudTrail insight event is automatically quarantining an IAM user or role when an unusual activity happened. Now let's assume one of our IAM user role got compromised and a bad actor is terminating the production EC2 instances. CloudTrail will automatically capture the terminate instance event, and you have an event bridge rule that is configured to compare the frequency with a defined benchmark. If anomaly detected, the event bridge rule can trigger a Lambda function which can automatically quarantine the compromised IAM user or the rule. That is how you can use AWS CloudTrail for any proactive remediation. Now let's go back to AWS Management Console and let's review CloudTrail in action. Back to my AWS Management Console. To access CloudTrail, I'll type CloudTrail in the service search option. The first service from the service search list, I'll click this. I do not have an existing trail apart from the default trail. So now let's review the default trail first. I'll expand that hamburger icon. And under this CloudTrail, you have dashboard, event history, insight, then lake, dashboard, query and all. Now let's click event history. These are all management events that is captured as part of the default trail. Now you have option to filter out. Either you can filter using event name and then you can provide the name here, or you can go with username if you want to search if any particular user is performing any action or not. Now let's review one of the events, and for this demo I am going to select delete association. You can see the username is EC2 state controller. I am going to click delete association. This is what the event record is. It's a JSON document. It has everything: access key, account ID, principal ID and all other details that you can use for any troubleshooting or analysis purpose. Now let's go to dashboard and let's create our own trail. To create a new trail, you can click the create trail option. I'll provide the name as CS demo trail. Now you can enable for all accounts in your organization, or you can do for this account. I'll select all accounts in this organization. In terms of storage location, either you can create a new S3 bucket or you can use existing S3 bucket. For us, we are going to select an existing S3 bucket. You can browse and maybe I'm going to use Terraform script library. You can use a prefix for that. Let's use the prefix as CES demo. If you want to enable SAC KMS encryption, that means once the log will be delivered, it will be encrypted. Why not? And here are the key options for the encryption. Either you can create a new key or you can use an existing key. I don't believe I have any key available. I'm going to create a new key and I'm going to provide the name as CS demo key. The next is additional settings. Here we have the log file validation. We have discussed about integrity validation. If you enable this, then you are going to enable integrity validation. Why not? SMS notification, whenever the logs will be delivered, if you want to enable SNS. I don't want to spam my mobile number with this. The next option is CloudWatch log. Optionally, you can deliver the log to CloudWatch and you can enable that. I don't have an use case. Tags are optional. It's better to add a tag. I'm not going to add any tag for this demo. I'll go to next. The next is here we have the event types. The first event, that is the management event, as we told, that will be enabled by default. However, you can remove that event. The next will be data event. You can also enable insight event, and there is a new event type, network activity event. That means if you want to capture for your VPC flow log and all. For this demo, let's select only management event. Now for the management event, what granularity you want to capture? Do you want to capture for all read and write, or do you want to capture only for the read or write? I'll go with both and I'll click next. The final step is review and create. Whatever the options you have selected, now you can review and you can click create. Since we already have a default trail to capture the management event, I'm not going to add one more trail. I'll cancel out from here. And now let's go back to our PPT to continue further. Now before we conclude this video, here are some certification tips based on the bootcamp you are selecting. For AWS Solution Architect Associate Certification, please focus on 90 days of free retention and the management events that are free. We discussed this multiple times throughout this video, and you should also understand the difference between management events and the data events. Now for AI Practitioner and Machine Learning Associate Certification, you must understand data events because the exam will test how you audit access to S3 data lakes or monitor activity within your machine learning pipeline. You should also know how to pipe these logs to an analytics tool like Amazon Athena for querying data lake access patterns. We have explained this feature using a diagram in key features and integration slide. Here is the diagram. If you have any confusion, you can review this slide one more time or drop your questions as comment to this video. That wraps up this module. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more AWS exam preparation courses and cloud certification bootcamps. Got questions or feedback? Drop them in the comment. We love to hear from you. Thanks for learning with us at CloudExpert Solutions. You are now one step closer to crushing your exam. See you in the next module.